The world is observing the first anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war. It was on the 24th February 2022 that Russia began its Ukraine onslaught by firing missiles after missiles into the tiny country in what was supposed to be a quick war. A year on, the Russia-Ukraine war has thrown up multiple lessons for the militaries across the world, including that of India. From the nature of the future warfare to overestimation of drones and what constitutes military power, the war has few lessons for everyone. Such has been the impact of the conflict that European countries like Germany have been rudely shaken out of their slumber and thinking that the continent will never see a war again. Germany has doubled its defense budget now. ThePrint has earlier focused on lessons from the war for the Air Force, the Army, including the evolving nature of armor and artillery. Do log on to the ThePrint website and read those stories. Multiple sources in the defense establishment that ThePrint spoke to said that the big takeaway from the Russia-Ukraine conflict is the need to be self-sufficient to the highest level when it comes to defense. They pointed out the need to have a defense industrial ecosystem that will keep supplies going on rather than be at the mercy of another country in case of a war. Imagine a country like Russia is running out of its stockpiles even though they were the ones who initiated this war. Russia has to be dependent on other countries for the basic supplies like bullets, shoes, forget the missiles or drones. Ukraine has to consistently appeal to the Western powers for keeping the supplies coming so that it can fight off the Russian onslaught. Incidentally, after the 2016 Uri attack, Indian military too had to go on a shopping spree across the world to pile up the required ammunition, including specialized rounds for its T-90 tanks as war loomed large. The shopping list included munitions for its frontline fighter aircraft, the Su-30 MKI, and even the Bofors howitzers. In 2019, the then Army Chief General Bipin Rawat had told ThePrint in an interview that the army had stocked up for 10 days of intense war with Pakistan and the focus was on creating reserves for 30 days of intense war along the northern and eastern borders, that is, with China. Another problem that Ukraine is facing is the servicing of the military equipment due to the wear and tear. It again has to depend on other countries for fast-tracking the repairs in middle of war. Officials in the defense establishment say that the country needs to have an ecosystem in place so that the flow of supplies is constant and pointed out that the government's push for indigenization of various equipment and ammunition was the right way forward. Another big takeaway from the Russia-Ukraine war for the Indian military is the possibility of future wars being long protracted ones. The Indian defense establishment has largely been thinking about future wars being, and I quote, short and swift. However, with the Russia-Ukraine war observing its one-year anniversary Friday, one cannot rule out the possibility of India getting involved in a war that may continue for months, if not for a year. All preparations of war till now have been based on the concept that all future conflicts will be short and swift, which may also involve a lot of known kinetic means such as cyber warfare. From the Army's cold start doctrine to shaping up of integrated battle groups to creating war wastage reserves, the Indian military has focused on short, intense war. The 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War was a short one in all terms. It was an all-out war. The Kargil conflict was a little protracted because of the way India fought and it was limited to a particular sector. Multiple sources ruled out the possibility of a long, protracted conventional war with Pakistan, but noted that any conflict on the northern or the eastern borders, that is with China, can be protracted with intensity changing from time to time. This is something that has been kept in mind and the focus now is to have enough war reserves to sustain us for a longer duration, sources said. Another lesson from the Russia-Ukraine war is that war still involves conventional firepower and boots on the ground. Many military practitioners across the world and even in India felt that conventional war fighting equipment such as tanks and fighter planes are on the way out. In 2020, the then Indian Army Chief General M.M. Naravne had described military icons of the 20th century, fighter planes and tanks, were on the way out the same way the Sony Walkman was made redundant by newer technologies to listen to music. However, the Russia-Ukraine war has shown that conventional firepower still matters because that is what both the countries are using. There is no doubt that cyber warfare and space are future, but conventional warfighting elements will continue to play a big role in future conflicts too, at least for the next 2 decades. Countries will need to have the right mix of everything. It would be foolish to rule out anything as of now. Another lesson is that a well-trained infantry still matters in war. While there will not be a trench warfare like situations, you will need well-trained soldiers in good numbers to push in and occupy enemy territories once the big firepower does their job. The fourth lesson that we can learn from the Russia-Ukraine war is that drones are necessary but cannot be the answer to all problems. The Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict has brought into focus how drones can change the course of war. With the smart utilization of drones in the early stages of war by the Ukraine to target Russian armored columns and artillery positions, multiple experts pointed out that fighter jets are on their way out. However, a year into the Russian-Ukraine war, it is now felt that while drones are cheap and good to hit at enemy positions, their effectiveness is questionable in a heavily challenged airspace. The Turkish drones, that is the Bayraktar TB2, were seen as the most deadly weapon in the hands of the Ukrainians. The Russians too started deploying drones that were hurriedly bought from Iran to take on the Ukrainians. But change in strategy by both countries has now ensured that the Turkish drones are out of action along with the Iranian ones. Armed drones or even loitering munitions cannot function in a heavily contested airspace like in India, China and Pakistan. Drones can work when they are unchallenged, like how Americans did in Afghanistan, a source explained. However, the swarm drones are difficult to be taken down and have the capability to overwhelm the enemy defenses and positions. The drones are useful for surveillance and also for carrying out attacks close to the border, but it is not the answer to all problems and will not be able to carry out deeper penetration like a fighter aircraft can. A majority of drones being launched by both Russians and Ukrainians are being shot down now. While it is true, the problem is that it is estimated that it costs up to 7 times more to down a drone with a missile than it actually does to launch one. The fifth lesson that you can learn from the Russia-Ukraine war is that a unified and interlinked war fighting strategy is needed. Multiple sources, both in India and abroad, say that one of the big problems with the Russian strategy was the lack of a combined arms formation. They said that the early setback to the Russian onslaught was because the armored columns, the mounted infantry, self-propelled artillery, air defense, air power, and logistics were not talking to each other. It was like each arm was fighting their own battle without any actual coordination on the ground. For example, the Air Force was not used to bombard entry points into Ukraine, fearing civilian casualties, which made it difficult for the armored columns to get in deep. And when they did finally get in, there was not much infantry to support them and hold ground. This affected the morale of the troops, and hence the morale of the troops got hit because of these early setbacks, while that of the Ukrainians rose due to the ability to strike the powerful Russian military. Sources pointed out that there needs to be a unified approach to war. The 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War was a success because the three services, that is the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, fought together. Remember that the Americans fight the same way. This is Snehesh Alex Philip for ThePrint. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel for more such videos.